if you're a higher level account manager and you're doing entry level stuff, you're literally taking somebody's job from them. Like, you're not letting them do their job and they have nothing else to do. And then Alan and Drew might say, well, why do I have so-and-so if they're not doing anything all day?
And one of the real challenges with scaling a small agency into a larger agency is figuring out how you're going to divide up that workflow. You know, historically, these small hometown agencies, they always go by the alphabet, but that doesn't really scale very well, you know, because you're down to like, oh, so-and-so's got A through B, you know, like as you add people, you can only split it up so many ways before it gets weird. And then the person with J through K is sitting on their hands and, you know, B through C is drowning in work.
You know, Mr. Give technology to our clients that makes it much easier to do business with us and for them to do business with who they need to do business with. Certificates being one of them. I've used eCerts Online since the day I launched the agency for that reason.
You know, a couple weeks ago, I had an all-hands meeting, and one of the key messages in that is accountability and criticism are not the same thing. You have to separate those two out. That is a big difference. You know, criticism is much more direct and, you know, at you, versus holding somebody accountable for the task is an entirely different thing, and it's how organizations move forward and improve.
And it's really tough to say, okay, these people are all bronze clients. If they call, we'll answer the phone. If they email, we'll reply. But we're literally not going to go out of our way to do anything other than this, because every time we touch this account, it costs us money, you know, to the point where you're not going to be profitable on it.
Clear. You don't use this terminology with clients. They have no way of knowing that they're this client or that client. This is just an internal thing only. Like, never mention this. This doesn't exist.
How many people view that as an excuse, but yet I see people who are ultra successful in spite of, and it's almost like you channel your energy to make sure you're the best version of yourself that you can be when you're at work, because you have that added responsibility of knowing you have someone who needs you to be that. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. And today I'm talking to two of what apparently are the many Kinneys of Vermont, as I found out when I was on my cruise over Christmas. You know, I think that the older I get and the more I pay attention to the things that come out of my mouth, the more I realize I probably need to enroll in Dr. Rick's 12-step program from Progressive, because I literally check all the boxes except. So when I'm sitting in the solarium, which is, you know, also adults only, typically. You know, I was the youngest in the solarium by probably 25 years, which means I loved it even more, because
well placed.
Perfectly quiet, enclosed, sun coming in, so it stayed warm because the breeze was actually blowing on the boat a bit. But jumped in the pool and I'm chatting with these people like, we're from Vermont. I'm like, really? What part? I said, I've got some friends that, you know, are in or around the Essex Junction area. And they said, really? What's their name? I said, well, they own an insurance agency, Kinney Insurance. It's Drew and Alan Kinney. He's like, man, there's Kinneys everywhere. Like, Vermont is the land of Kinneys, apparently. So you're two of many, but I'm glad you guys were able to come on, man. This is long overdue. Just really kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what your journey's been like as you've had the agency and some of the things that you've done to transition it. Because, you know, one thing that I would tell you guys, just from the outside looking in, you've done a really, really good job the last couple of years of building an online presence that I'm going to make the assumption did not exist when you took over. And, you know, that has been very intentional and very, very consistent. So kudos to you for that. But I want to talk about what it's like to take over the family agency, what you've done to sort of take it to the next level. But before we do that, just do the normal thing, take a couple seconds, give everybody kind of what your backgrounds are and how you got into the agency, and then we'll take off running.
Sure. Go ahead. All right, Dave. Well, we appreciate you having us on, man. It's been like you said, it's we're probably like the early adopters and listeners. I mean, I think back to like, what was it, 2018, heading out to San Diego, and I made you drag a Florida Risk XXL sweatshirt out there, and we hadn't even.
I remember that, and that's after. But the thing is, before that was Brain Share in St. Pete.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the first time I met you, sat behind me.
I was completely unknown, man. I was flying under the radar at the time. I kept to myself, minded my own business, didn't realize there were like other agents that were actually on the internet collaborating. So I kind of did my own thing, and well, now here we are.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
Man, it's crazy how like these conferences all blend, because if you were to ask me to timeline those two, I would have totally flipped them around.
yeah.
But yeah, so I got into the agency back in 2012. Before that, I was living in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was working for Deloitte Consulting, one of the big consulting firms down there, doing some data analytics type stuff, and working for the federal government projects, Department of Defense, things like that. Kind of got the itch to start heading back home, and right around that time was when my father had reached out to us and said, "Hey, I've been thinking about kind of my next steps in the agency, and just wanted to see if you had any interest in getting involved in the family insurance agency." And until that time, I really hadn't had much thought
Is
about
that a
it.
weird call? Like, I mean, because if I know Alan's background too, and he'll share it in a second, but I mean, you're in DC working for Deloitte, working on government contracts, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, your dad's like, "Hey, man, you want to come into the agency? I've been thinking about it."
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a little different, but I think he kind of knew I was itching to probably start getting back home. I was in the DC area for about 5 years, and a little different than small town Vermont, and certainly Burlington being the biggest city of 55,000, definitely different than that. So it was it definitely was different, but it was enough of a thing to be like, you know what, yeah, I could see myself doing this, and so kind of jumped at it. And at the time, I was dating Rachel. We weren't even engaged or anything, and had to kind of convince her of that, and moved her up to Vermont, like all good Vermonters do, because you got to diversify the population up here.
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, so then jumped in the agency, and that, like you said, it's kind of been a fast
we
run
can't have
after
Kinney
that.
on Kinney in Vermont. Okay,
No.
You don't want to see
that. And to your point, David, when I joined, we didn't even have a website. So yeah, we definitely built a heck of an online presence in 10 years.
Isn't it crazy? What about you, Alan?
Yeah, similarly. So I have a background in engineering. I worked for IBM for 7 years, and that was in New York. And then we moved, we decided we wanted to be back close to the family, my wife and I. So we moved back to Vermont, and I worked for GE Healthcare for 4 years here locally. And I was towards the end of that 10 years when my father started looking at acquiring another agency. Drew had joined the agency at that point. And he came flying in my office one day and was like, "Hey, if this happens, I need to be able to have a way to run this office and have a succession plan in place." So because he was taking it over from another agency owner that was retiring. So he's like, "I don't want to just create another succession planning nightmare here." So that's how I got pulled in. And that was just about 6 months after Drew did. So like I said, I designed our first website. That was my handiwork, and and we've been on a running path since then. Like you said, it's really for us. The journey we've been on is taking the agency from that single office. You walk in and you see all the employees sitting right in front of you every day, to now 22 employees and 3 locations, and trying to put in place the systems and the processes to run that and manage that, all while growing it. I think we've tripled in size in the last 6 years. So you're trying to do all that while you're flying the airplane in the air. You're trying to rebuild everything and then redesign stuff. So it's been a great journey, and it's every day there's something new that we're learning and working on and refining and trying to figure out. And it's been a lot of fun, but like you said, a challenging one, especially with this hard market and COVID before that. So we've definitely had a few curveballs come at us since we acquired the agency. It's now 6 years ago now.
How far geographically separated are your 3 locations?
About 35 minutes. Now our third office is probably 20 minutes to either one, but originally we were about 30 minutes apart.
Yeah. That's probably good distance too. I mean, it's easy to get to and from. It's probably a little bit tough when you're just starting out, figuring out how you're going to handle an entire office that for all practical purposes are remote employees to you because they're not at the mothership. What was that like? I mean, because I think
a little bit of divide and conquer at first. It was like when one of us sat in one office, the other one sat in the other office.
Yeah. Early on, it was very rare that we were both in the same office. We try to rotate around and try to be in different spots. Now it's easier for us to be in the same spot at least 2 days a week so we can connect on things. But yeah, those other 3 days, usually we're going around to one of the satellite offices. We also again, you start building out an infrastructure and the processes around these things. So we started leaning heavily and created really the role of an office manager. And now that role has grown for us to a chief of staff type role. We also have another team member that's taken on an operations management role. So those two roles, frankly, are key to our success as we stand in front of you today. If we didn't have those two individuals helping us, kind of herd the cats. So, you see a lot less hair on my head at least. And
I already lost
everybody lost all his. So you see a lot more gray hair. And so, yeah, it is without those two folks, those have been key employees for us and trying to grow those roles and define them and help and kind of keep the madness under control.
What does that look like for you guys? Because, I mean, from my perspective, I think I desperately want that person that I can offload things to from an operational perspective specifically. But I also don't know how easy it is for me to give up, even though I desperately know that I need to. Like, how much did you wrestle with that?
Every day?
Yeah, I figure, man. Like, I mean, and that's
but
the
some
thing.
of it though, David, is like they're good at the things that we're not good at or don't like to do, and so that kind of pays off too.
Yeah,
well,
honestly, I mean, that's how it's kind of developed for me because I handle a lot of stuff that they're taking over. It's like you're almost getting to the point where you're like, I just don't even have the energy anymore for that, and you realize it. So I've kind of got it out of my system to the point that you're like, you know what, she's going to do a so much better job of this than I'm going to do. And I just need to let her run with it. And yeah, you're going to stumble through some of it. And you're right, the parts that are real important to you, you keep close and you keep that piece of it. But generally speaking, and we're still working on, like I said, wrestle with it every day. But, and what you really need to do though, is you got to define what that role looks like, what it is, and most importantly, what it isn't. Because we even found early on, there was a lot of crossover between our operations person and our person leading their team. And we want to make sure they weren't both getting tied up doing the same thing all day because we don't have two resources dedicated to something that one person should be doing. So that's been kind of the latest battle. Is like, all right, how do we make sure that those two roles are clearly defined? And my operations person is focused operationally, and my team lead, what we're calling the chief of staff role, is focused on growing our people and these bigger, longer term problems. Kind of the analogy we use is our operations manager is kind of our umpire on the field. She's calling balls and strikes, and she doesn't understand why or what. She just knows that pitch was a ball or a strike. And if we didn't do something the way we should, she's going to call it. Because what you ran into is a person that also understands what's happening on the personnel side, knows, well, we didn't get this done because Susie, her kid was sick yesterday. Well, it still didn't get done. So
I was going to say, man, let's just stop for a second because I think that's something important just to highlight because
so you're right.
You're not the bad guy. If you like, at the end of the day, I understand that Susie got sick, but the business doesn't care. Like,
right.
And it doesn't mean I don't care as the leader. It just means the business needs that to be done. That's the whole point of delegating that to the person that was supposed to do it. So then how do you get it done? Right. And I think that a lot of times people sometimes think, I don't know, people get weird, right?
Sure.
I could make that same statement in sales meeting, and all of a sudden, oh, David doesn't care about anybody on the team because
and that's what we
brought up that it didn't get done. And that's not my point. My point is, I understand things are going to happen. We have to have redundancies in place to make sure that the processes still happen the way they're supposed to.
Yeah, and that's exactly the battle we're working through. Is like, okay, so how do we make sure that we are identifying that this isn't getting done? How do we now go get it done? But also recognize that, yes, we got to support Susie, whose kid is homesick, and help her through that too. But I got to have both things happening because before we just wouldn't do the thing that needed to get done. And then all of a sudden we lose a client that was important to us because we never got something done we said we were going to get done. And we didn't get it done for good reasons. But like you said, the redundancy wasn't there. I didn't have that person saying, hey, this item is sitting in a workflow for 2 weeks. Why hasn't someone gone into it yet? And that's kind of what we've been trying to build out is, all right, how do I have my person calling balls and strikes? And when she sees a problem, she can let the other person know that then goes and works on the long-term solution. But meanwhile, we are addressing the short-term problem of we got to fix this issue right now that we've got brewing. So.
Yeah, and I do think, it's a natural tendency to go that route. And we honestly just a couple weeks ago had an all hands meeting, and one of the key messages in that is accountability and criticism are not the same thing. You have to separate those two out. That is a big difference. Criticism is much more direct and at you, versus holding somebody accountable for the task is an entirely different thing, and it's how organizations move forward and improve. So.
And we found another important piece of it. Sorry, I'm interrupting, but another important piece of it is letting the team know, hey, we've taken our operations person and we're asking her to do this. Like, so she's not feeling like she's always the bad person out there.
Yeah.
We're asking her to let us know when workflows aren't getting done, when we're behind, when somebody's buried. That's her job. So if you get a call from her that's like, hey, I see you're behind on stuff, it's nothing negative. We're just trying to figure out, do I have to go use somebody else to get this done? Because oftentimes when you unwind why somebody is behind on what they're doing, they're going above and beyond where they shouldn't be, which was hard to say, but like we have different roles in our agency for a reason. And if I've got someone that's supposed to be doing complicated high-end stuff, doing very basic stuff, I have a person that's supposed to be doing basic stuff sitting around literally twiddling their thumbs because they can't do the complicated stuff. And my complicated stuff person is getting overwhelmed and overloaded, and now all of a sudden the system breaks and falls apart. So I need to know, like, hey, what can we shuffle down the chain so that everybody's busy? One good analogy someone used was, if you're a higher level account manager and you're doing entry level stuff, you're literally taking somebody's job from them. Like, you're not letting them do their job and they have nothing else to do. And then Alan and Drew might say, well, why do I have so-and-so if they're not doing anything all day?
Which obviously you're good at that. That's why you got promoted to where you're at now. We all know you can do the job. Like, let somebody else do it.
Yeah, and another drum we bang is like, people don't, you'll look at a task and you'll say, hey, that's a 2-minute task. It'll take me longer to go tell Susie how to do it for me than for me to do it. But you never know what roadblocks you're going to hit. And that's what we run into. Like, an analogy I like to use, one of my top account managers, I walked into her office one day and you can see she's stressed and frazzled. I'm like, what's going on? And like, she's like, oh, I tried to quickly write this and it was a little small, like mobile home. And she all of a sudden gets tied up doing it for 6 hours because she hasn't done it in 4 years. And she didn't have the login. She didn't know how to use the screen. She didn't know all this stuff. And before you know it, what should have been a 5-minute task became a 6-hour thing. And if she had just given it to our team member that does that every day, it would have been done within 20 minutes and she would have never had to get involved. But she's like, oh, I just thought I could get it done quick. And that's what happens is they think, oh, this auto change will just take a minute. And then all of a sudden the symbols don't load, or, something weird happens. And then all of a sudden it snowballs. And now they're not available for our high-end client that needs that extra work. And it just becomes a train wreck. So that's what we keep trying to make sure we're looking at and identifying to see that when it happens, stop it, intervene, and get things going the right direction.
So my thing is this, man. I've always not had a problem delivering the tough message to employees because in my mind, if I've done my job right and I've got all of the processes in place and the process isn't followed and something breaks, I'm not the one who made the decision to not follow the process. Somebody made that conscious decision, right? So if I have to pull somebody in and have a conversation and say, hey, I noticed that the last 5 times this hasn't happened and I wanted to find out what's going on. Is it an issue? Well, well, here's the problem. It's kind of like the expectation you follow the process. And if you don't, you're making a decision to not go by what our rules are, for lack of a better term. That can't happen. But, Drew, you were in rows and columns for a living, brother. Like you were at Deloitte. I'm pretty sure there was some level of organization in that organization. And not that you walked into mass chaos, but let's be honest, man. I don't know of any family-owned Main Street type agency in the country that is going to be as sophisticated as Deloitte is for their workflows and everything when you walk in the front door. Is that where the hair went? Like, did you just pull it all out the first day? Or?
No, I think I already lost it ahead of time. No, the biggest thing, is, certainly, you're walking in and people aren't even using Excel, and I live in Excel. And so, everything comes down to like your little handy dandy, notebook or whatever it is, on somebody's desk. And so that transition was definitely challenging. And as we kind of built out processes, and certainly once we added another location, people really started to see the value of, all right, we got to make sure all this stuff gets documented and, put into our systems and in the right place. And, it's, we think back, like we were one of those agencies that was on, TAM applied and, had to move to 360. So everything was integrated and tight. And, so there's, since then we've added AgencyZoom. There's been a lot of technology additions from something that really, didn't have a lot of technology for sure.
I'll tell you something that I did this past week. Like, this week was weird. Like, both the last 2 weeks were weird. I mean, I hate the fact that if the holiday itself fell on Tuesday, then we would have been a long weekend, right?
Right.
But Wednesday's like the exact, or Thursday for that matter.
Right.
Wednesday's like the exact worst time to have a holiday.
Yeah.
We have 2 wasted weeks at basically what's the Super Bowl of insurance going into 1/1. And it's just, you don't know who's working, who's not working, at the carriers, at the wholesalers, all of that. But
people are getting sick. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. I had everybody came in on Monday for our normal sales and ops meetings, and I had one-on-ones in the afternoon after it. And part of that conversation always is how do you think things went this year? What do you think we need to do differently? Essentially, you've heard me talk about it before, stop, start, and continue. But one of the conversations I had was with one of my team members who I would say has excellent client relationships, outstanding. Then when you pull the Lightspeed voice report and see the average call time on her extension, you understand why she has excellent relationships with the clients. And so, part of what we've done at the agency is, give technology to our clients that makes it much easier to do business with us and for them to do business with who they need to do business with. Certificates being one of them. I've used eCerts Online since the day I launched the agency for that reason. But a couple weeks ago, this particular team member was on vacation, and I covered the desk as well as Kyle. And I'm thinking to myself, why am I getting all of these phone calls and emails for certificates when it has been pretty much the law that was laid down for the last 24 months? Everybody uses eCerts Online. Like, it's in our automated onboarding. Abby reaches out to teach them how to do it and everything. And I start digging. And so when I was having the conversation, this team member said, well, I feel like I'm really good at customer service. I said, I feel like you have exceptional client relationships, so much so that the average time you spend on the phone with a client on your extension is 34 minutes. That means that you can have 16 calls a day and handle business for people if you're going back to back to back to back to back. And you and I both know that is completely unrealistic. And so when I start listening to these calls and I hear what the topic is, number one, it's always, hey, I need to get a certificate. And then it goes into, what are you doing for the holidays? You traveling anywhere? Any special get? And look, we all want to have that small talk. I don't want people to think that they're calling an absolutely sterilized environment where, we're not going to be friendly. But at the same time, I can't have an average call time being 30 minutes plus. It just, that doesn't work.
It's hard to strike that balance between developing the relationship and maintaining that relationship.
And I think it's easier for me than it is for you, because I'm in a far more populated area where people just want to get from point A to point B. I have a feeling, having not been up there in a long, long time, and never being at your agency, you probably have a lot of people that have been clients for a while, or if not, that you've known for a while. And, when they see you, they want to chat with you. And it's tough, man, because we don't have walk-ins here, but I feel like we've always got one legacy person that's elderly, that's in the personal lines book, and they want the monthly review of their policies in person. And they'll just walk in the front door and sit in the lobby and wait for somebody to sit down. And I mean, I used to stop what I was doing and go and pull people into the conference room and chat with them. It was never about insurance, man. I mean, one guy was a widower, and we were basically across the street from where his condo is, and we were an easy target for him to just come over. And when you start thinking through that, man, I'm a big softy to a certain degree too. I can't be so hardcore. This guy needs somebody to talk to in his life. Then it got a little weird when he asked if I would take him to the one golf course we belong to and let him spread his wife's ashes across one of the one of the holes, because that was her favorite hole in all of golf. But that was a different story. but then he unfortunately passed away, but then he was replaced by another person. And now, Grayson gets to deal with the personal lines people more. But we were having this conversation, even when we were on the boat. He's like, Dad, do you ever have these people that just, I'm like, you guys, that's the new one. That's who took their place. And it always seems that way. It's a tough balance, man.
Yeah, we used to have one of our employees that retired over the summertime. She was our in-office therapist, and oftentimes whether it was a phone call or somebody coming in, she was the one that would catch them, and they would chat there for 30 minutes, and you could almost they would get done with that conversation, and they come into my office, and they're like, I could just hear you screaming at me, even though I didn't say a word, But it's like, you're right. You want to keep fostering that relationship, but it does cross the line some points where you're just not productive.
Yeah, it's tough, man. So let me ask you this. You mentioned that, you've been Vertafore users for a while, and you've started, I'm assuming for a while now you've had AgencyZoom. I don't know how long it's been in place, but talk a little bit about what that's been like to sort of monitor task management and things like that. Because we use HubSpot for it in the agency. If you're in sales, it's a task. If you're in service, it creates the ticket. And that's really been, it's a great way to measure it. The problem is you constantly, and this is where I've dropped the ball, you always have to look at that workflow to make sure things haven't changed that are causing it to break. Whether it's actually broken in the system or not, it's one thing, but it's just not working right. So we're actually at a point where we're going back through every HubSpot workflow that we've built over the last 4 or 5 years and making sure, and in many cases having to go in and revamp them. But I will tell you that the Carruthers family has officially joined the 21st century, and we now have a shared family grocery list on the iCloud, where if the kids use the last of something, they're now required to type it into the family list. And what, man?
Does Ethan load that list up, or does he like the forgettable guy?
Ethan's left off of that list. He's not part of it.
Fabuloso.
Fabuloso 32 ounce, Fabuloso 64 ounce. Ethan in phones is an interesting thing because he doesn't understand boundaries. And the family, like my extended family's like, yeah, give him our number. It's okay. No, you just please trust us. We live with him all the time. Yeah. He's going to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning when he gets up and he's like a pack of ravenous animals going through our kitchen. If I have to do the standard over 50 trip to the bathroom in the middle of the night, I always pop my head out the door to see what kind of condition the kitchen's in. And many nights I've been there for 20 minutes at 3 o'clock in the morning, just getting it back to somewhat normal so that Annie doesn't freak when she wakes up in the morning. But no, he was specifically left off that list. But look, again, the process is there. If you choose not to follow it, I'm sorry, guys, you don't get your Uncrustables this time. Daddy told you to put it on the list. You didn't put it on the list. Tough lesson to learn. Now you get regular peanut butter and jelly. And don't cut the crust off. Eat the crust. It's part of the punishment.
That's right. Yeah. So we started with AgencyZoom when it first came out, really just to handle the
back in like 2020. Yeah. Just for sales leads, we
were finding sales leads were sitting, and I'd have to go rummage through people's desks and figure out what they were ignoring and stuff. And so we went to that to try to start bringing some organization to the chaos of that initial intake through quoting phase, but also our team, and we're still not great at it, so I'm not pretending we got this figured out, but they weren't doing a good job of following up on quotes they put out. They'd email them out and then move on to the next thing and never go back to it. So we could build out AgencyZoom to do those touch points and follow-ups, provided people don't go and shut off all the automation, because they would do that too. Yeah. But generally speaking, you could kind of control things that way a little bit. So that gave us that. And then we were using it pretty effectively in that way to track sales and so forth, and using it for marketing. And we were looking to bring on our first virtual employee. And at the time, I was talking with some folks that have been successful with it. And that was one of the questions I asked. I was like, hey, how do you get work from your team to the virtual employees? And their immediate answer was, well, we do it through AgencyZoom. And I'm like, what do you mean you do it through AgencyZoom? And they're like, yeah, there's this new beta feature out there that you can start creating service tickets. So we called probably Kat up at the time. And we're like, Kat, and I'm like, hey, can we get on the beta? And we did. So I think we were like agency 2 or 3 to start using service tickets with AgencyZoom. And now that is the primary way we control our service workload, is through those tickets. And that's how we can make sure that auto changes are going to our processing team, and then higher end commercial changes are going to the commercial team. We can set that up to round robin it so that it evenly distributes amongst the people. It can go to the people we pick, so that we can be like, all right, hey, I've trained David to do this task. Now he can go into that workflow. So I think last year we did roughly 17,000 service tickets we closed. So we're using it effectively. Now what we're not doing a great job is monitoring, make sure things aren't dying in those service workflows. So that's part of 2025, is getting my operations manager every day to go look at these workflows and make sure things are moving and workloads getting spread out and things are getting handled through that system. But it's been a good transition.
So let me ask you this quick, because I don't know enough about how AgencyZoom works, just because I'm not a user. I know what I can do inside HubSpot. And, number one, I have to go to a columnar view of anything that we're doing. Like, I can get a table and where it's in list format, but you might as well put it out in Japanese, because like my brain just doesn't process. I need to be able to glance at it and say, wait a minute, we've got like 15 things stacked up in this column. Who's responsible for this? What's going on? And now it's very easy for me, big dumb animal, to go in and troubleshoot, because visually I can see what's going on there. But what I wonder with AgencyZoom is, when it sits in a stage of that process, does it have automatic tasking and things and reminders that are going to whoever owns that ticket or task to remind them that it's still there? And then is there a way to escalate, for lack of a better term, if it's there for 72 hours and it's only supposed to be there for 42, that now it shoots a task over to your operations manager to look into it and find out why that thing is sitting? Can you build it out to that level, or is it more cookie cutter? I see Alan kind of getting like snickering a little bit in the background.
He's the brain.
You can build those out, and we built them, but to get back to your point before, you got to follow the process. So or hold the people's feet to the fire. And so there, at times there's, people need their feet held to the fire, and that's kind of where we're at now. Right? It's like, you can't just ignore these tasks. They're not going to go away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what Alan's alluding to is, our operations manager this year is really going to be pushing on that a lot more than we historically have.
If you're in production, it's easy. You don't get paid if it's not in the system.
Right.
That's how you get them into the system. With service people, it's a little bit tougher to do that stuff.
And one of the real challenges with scaling a small agency into a larger agency is figuring out how you're going to divide up that workflow. Historically, these small hometown agencies, they always go by the alphabet, but that doesn't really scale very well, because you're down to like, oh, so-and-so's got A through B, like as you add people, you can only split it up so many ways before it gets weird. And then the person with J through K is sitting on their hands, and, B through C is drowning in work. And so
Mr. Janikowski called for his annual checkup.
And so that's where we sort of pushed to this ticketing system, because we could build out these assignment groups and round robin and redistribute things. Now, the challenge with that, though, is that, when it was the alphabet, the person who had A through C, they had to own what was in A through C. Now it's much easier to just round robin that thing, punt it to somebody else, and so you have to kind of dial that in and really pull that framework in, or else it's going to get loose on you.
Yeah, what's been interesting to me through this journey is, it's amazing the number of things that, like 5 years ago, we had one problem, and then you put in place things to fix it. And as we've grown and scaled, you now look at that and you're like, all right, that doesn't work anymore, or we've got to retrain what we were doing before. So a good example, like Drew was just alluding to, is like when we were the alphabet system, if something came in for your letter of the alphabet, David, you owned it to finish. But that could be a problem, because if you're part of the alphabet's getting hammered that day, you're overwhelmed. And I got Betty down the hall, whose alphabet's pretty quiet that day, and she's wasting your time wanting to talk about the TV show last night and something else while you're drowning. And then, the next day might role flip, but still, you couldn't spread the workload around, but you had a concrete owner. David owns that client's issue. Well, now we got the other problem where, all of a sudden now you can run this scenario where no one owns it, where this thing keeps going back into a workflow and getting cycled around. And before you know it, you've been 2 weeks when the client's like, not getting what they need done, because no one's saying, hey, this has become an ongoing issue. We got to raise our hand and flag it. So that's kind of our next challenge, is how do we get the team almost getting some of that mindset that we used to have of like, hey, I'm looking at the activities here and I see that this claim has been an ongoing issue now for 3 months. I got to raise my hand and just let somebody know the process isn't working. We got to look at this and take this as a one-off and figure out why is this client having these issues, and jump in. Because sometimes when you finally hear about it at our level, you're like, holy crap, we've been tripping over this thing for 3 months. What are we doing here? I see 8 people have touched it. Like, somebody somewhere needs to go, wait a minute, this thing's snowballing and it's not working the way it's supposed to, and let's go fix it and then figure out how we fix the process. So that is the challenge that you then run into, is when everybody owns something, nobody owns something.
So let me ask you this, because this is something that we did recently. Honestly, completely transparent and vulnerable, very
Yeah.
eye-opening experience for me. But we went through and did client tiering. Have you guys done any of that yet?
Yeah.
Talk about that process. Like, what, because for me, it was pretty easy. It was, we banded it based on the size of revenue, or I mean, I think we did it by premium on the account. So we did, platinum, gold, silver, bronze. If you're platinum, you're 250 plus in premium. You automatically get all the bells and whistles. And I think gold is 100 to 250, silver is 25 to 100, and then bronze is anything below 25. And like, we want to be out of the bronze business as quickly as we possibly can.
Sure.
Or make it to where, okay, I can accept. And I think part of it too is human nature. It's really tough for me to know what the value is that I bring to the middle market and be able to not want to do that for every one of my clients, which it doesn't make sense, obviously, but it's really tough to say, okay, these people are all bronze clients. If they call, we'll answer the phone. If they email, we'll reply, but we're literally not going to go out of our way to do anything other than this, because every time we touch this account, it costs us money, to the point where you're not going to be profitable on it. Having one person sell and service that book makes that a whole lot easier to manage. But I'm interested from your perspective, because you guys are far more established than what I am, and you're across, like, you've got everything in there, I'm assuming. You got some decent sized commercial, you got middle, you got small, you've got personal lines and all of that stuff. So when you went through to do that, what that process looked like?
Well, I would say when we sort of went and looked at it, there was 2 real things. One is commercial lines was done a little bit differently than personal lines. Personal lines was very simplistic. I had to use the tools that we had, which was AgencyZoom was really good at pulling reports for clients that have 3+ policies, and that became our shield.
That was it. Yeah, no, personal lines, same thing for us.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think that we have 4 tiers. I just think we have, these are the people who have more than one policy. These are the people who are monoline. And now we need to either move these people to this, or to where they have multiple, or move them out.
Yeah, and then commercially, we kind of sat down with our producers and our team and service team and looked down and like, all right, which are these really important accounts? And, we kind of labeled those as our hands-on accounts, which are kind of our pet accounts. And then there's like middle grouping and a bottom grouping, and we kind of worked through it. And really, the idea is not necessarily to give a different experience to each of them. It's just who we have working on it at this point, So what's been nice about that is that we've been able to bring some newer folks into the industry, and, I can feed them our base clients, which are monoline auto or monoline home, service related tasks, and they can learn how to do those things, without touching a lot of things at one time or having to think about a lot of, a lot of different exposures and things. So it helps us get up to speed a lot faster than graduate them into, 2+ or then 3+, you know what I mean? So it's been really helpful for bringing new people in, and, really our experience doesn't necessarily change. It's just who we have working on it does, somebody that can understand, your Main Street America business, but also we are all their personal lines and how they're all intertwined and all that. It is a different skill set than somebody that's green to the industry. So,
well, that's got to be a big advantage for you, though, that if you have the ability to bring people in from outside the industry, you're not limiting your labor pool. And like, I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that Vermont doesn't have insurance professionals growing on trees with the, the maple syrup.
It doesn't, and we've kind of made a real focus on doing that. Now we've had our challenges, as you might suspect. That the hit rate on bringing green people in and having them come through is not as high as you would like it to be.
I resemble that.
The deal is, though, you have to do it though, because the industry, for whatever reason, however many years ago, we didn't look like a very attractive industry, and so folks weren't getting into the insurance space, and we've been doing whatever we can to try to flip that a little bit. You know, as our buddy Jason Cass says, it's the best industry on God's green earth.
Absolutely. No, I mean, but to your point though, you have to, like, for us, it's taken me a while to get it dialed in on the service side for how we're going to bring somebody along. But I think we've finally gotten that part figured out. Now if somebody's not able to get up to speed, it's really, they should never have been hired. And I take responsibility for that.
Yeah, and we've had to look at how we hire and stuff and adjust, because same thing early on, especially when we first took over the agency, we didn't really have a lot of problem finding experienced people. We had a list of people that wanted to come work for us. COVID kind of changed a lot of that, because you had all these venture capital firms throwing a ton of money at people, let them go fully remote, all these things. So that's when we started really focusing on bringing new people in. And then as people started to realize what it means to work for some of these venture capital firms, we've seen recently some opportunity to kind of scoop up a few of them that want to get back to a family-owned agency. So it's been an interesting market dynamic probably over the last 7 years that we've kind of worked our way through. But yeah, we've done the same thing. How do we bring someone in new? How do we train them? So like right now, we've got somebody new coming up through the pipeline. We've hired a couple experienced people. We've got 4 people, or 3 people really, that are coming up new that have been with us for a year plus now, almost 2.
Yeah.
So we're working like every angle on this you can. So it's worked, but it's been one of the challenges too, is like, how do we recruit, who we going after, and how do we try to compete with the venture capitalists that are banging on our people every day to see if they can poach them away. So.
Yeah, we're sports oriented people, so I have to think of like, all right, what's the depth chart? All right, who have we drafted this year that we can develop? Who can't we develop? You know, and how do we move them in, and who's sliding into guard when Susie retires, and who's becoming a tackle? You know, like and it hasn't been easy, because we've, you know, I think there was really a point that, you know, over the summer or so, we were looking around and thinking we were pretty green, you know, in some of these spots, and we needed to really either go get some experience, and, you know, it works just like sports. You know, you either have to go pay to get somebody experienced, or you have to draft them, you know, and
well, there's definitely a salary cap.
And like Drew said, again, a sports analogy, but that's who we are. Like, yeah, you can have a great young offensive line, but all of a sudden they run some complicated blitz at you, we're going to miss it. And it's got pushes hitting the quarterback. So we just got to be ready for it and pick it up and go from there.
But that impacts your processes, because, you know, it's like, you know, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to run. But, you know, can we run that with who we got up there right now? I don't know. You know, maybe we have to peel it back a little bit and simplify, you know?
Well, and you have to be looking at your hand that you're dealt and determining who needs to cross train on what, because you don't just want people to come in and get really good at one thing. To your point, if somebody's going to slide in when the next person retires, you don't wait until that person retires. You know, you really need to build a backup for every position in there. And at some point, then you can rotate that around, and now you've got people that can do the 3 or 4 things as opposed to the 1. But that definitely takes time to make that happen.
What's an interesting dynamic too, just to, you know, prep you for it if you encounter it too, is, you know, we obviously, like Drew mentioned, had a key team member retire, and we knew it was going to happen. She didn't make it a secret, so we had a couple years to get ready for it. So we actually hired a year ahead of time, like a number of people, and trained and got ready for this to occur. And then it happens, and everybody's like, we're down a person. Oh, we're not going to make it. How are we going to survive without her? And I'm like, well, we just hired 3 people a year and a half ago. But it's amazing how quickly the baseline changes within your employees' mentality of like, all right, well, we had 15 people. They hired 3. We have 18. That one that's supposed to retire just retired. Now we have 17. We're down a person. We're short staffed. Like, well, no. We're still up too.
Yeah.
It's like
we were planning.
We planned on this, so it's like we've had to actually work on that. Even the last 6 months is like messaging some of this stuff to the team of like, hey, we're hiring these people now in anticipation of needing some more people down the road. We're a little overstaffed right now, you know? So like, that's, we had to really start communicating, because it's amazing how quickly everybody went to like telling clients on the phone, we're a little understaffed right now. We had someone retire. And you're like, whoa. What are we doing? Yeah. Like, I'm flying out of my office, screaming and yelling, like, we hired like literally 7 people. Like, we're not understaffed. We're overstaffed.
Yeah, probably not the best thing to say to a client.
No. Oh, you got it. And that's another thing for people to understand too, like even the tiering that you talked about, like we probably got to reemphasize it because it's been a few months. Like when we rolled this out to the team, we stood up in front of them. Like these words never get used to the client. And we still pick words that people wouldn't be offended by. It's like, you know,
shield core,
stuff like that someone's not going to really know. But I didn't want someone, I could just hear it on the phone. Oh, you're only a core client, so I need you to get you over to so-and-so. And I would, lose my what. And but that's what they don't think complicated. Like, so that's the challenge you have. It's like, you really gotta be very clear. You don't use this terminology with the clients. They have no way of knowing that they're this client or that client. This is just an internal thing only. Like, never mention this. This doesn't exist.
How hard was it for you to go in? Like, I'm assuming you put tags in the AMS or something so that when you got a screen pop, it would automatically show this is.
That part was the easy part, trying to then reshuffle, like who's the assigned CSR or whoever on the account is the hard part. And just because between 360 and Zoom, they don't give you a lot of great tools for that process. And our stuff was kind of a mess as it was. So it really has been, and still working on, sitting down with our, VAs and having them grind through that list, more manually than I care for it to be.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, another interesting thing, we're talking about tiering a little bit here, that some homework Drew did, and it was rough, like kind of almost back of the envelope type stuff, but it was pretty eye-opening, is not only we looked at our accounts from a service level perspective too. So how many service activities are we doing for David Carruthers? So, I may love the fact that I insure David Carruthers and it's this awesome, revenue into the agency. And every time I see the truck go by, I'm patting myself on the back that he's my client. But then all of a sudden Drew starts running the math and saying, hey, this guy, for whatever reasons, very highly active, whether it's certificates or needing endorsements or buying stuff, selling stuff, all these things. Well, before you know it, we're actually losing $2 to $3 grand a year servicing David Carruthers, because that was one challenge. We had all these people, we're constantly adding people, and the team's constantly like overwhelmed and stressed. And that's what I said to him, like, I don't understand like why this is happening. So we started looking at, okay, all right, some of these key clients, or all of our clients really, like who's driving the workload. So we ran reports through AMS, and then Drew does this fancy data analysis stuff and cross references them. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this account that we love and we think's great, they're costing us money every single day. Now, we haven't done a lot with it, but it has kind of molded our views a little, because we share that data with like our sales team and for some of our producers, and we will be like, hey, the only reason this guy's on the books right now is because you're making your split off of it. Drew and I are actually losing money on this account. So if he's giving you a hard time, if he's working you on price, if you get sick of him, let's just, we don't have to move him out of the agency, but maybe we don't remarket him. Maybe we just say, this is the best option we got, because I'm not going to go remarket you and now make even less. So that was some of the conversations we started to have. And I was like, and oh, by the way, he's probably stressing out your team member that's supporting you, because they're busy all the time with this guy, and he's causing problems. So it was really an interesting data analysis to do, and it really did open our eyes a little bit to some of these accounts that you're like, yeah, that's one of our prize accounts. Well, actually, we're losing money on our prize account, so it doesn't make sense to keep our prize account any longer than we need to.
Because now that money has to come from the marketing budget, because that's what you're using it for. You're saying, hey, we represent so-and-so in your industry. Wouldn't you like to come on board? Yeah. And I mean, I dealt with this at the first agency I started in. We represented a very well-known restaurant chain internationally, to the point it was big enough there were 27 CSRs on that account. One account, 27 CSRs. Start running the numbers on what you pay a CSR, and understand, then you have to marry that to when you start dealing with massive companies like that. You don't take commission. It is service fee, 100%.
Right.
And it's a declining fee as the premium grows, because you just can't justify, that's why you don't do the commission, right? And so when you start running those numbers, that's what I said, holy crap, we're losing a ton of money. The response was, oh, but we got all of these other restaurant chains as a result of it, and they're actually pretty profitable. Okay, fine. At least you made an educated decision there, But to your point, I think all of us probably have those accounts in our book of business that are names that are recognizable on the streets. They're great to talk about at the point of sale, but then if you really start peeling things back and looking at it, maybe not what I really want.
And scenarios pop up where maybe they ask us to help contribute for something to help they're bring in like a yellow bird or something like that, and we're looking at the bottom line, like you want me to, like, I'm going to be in the hole, so but like it doesn't make any sense anymore,
We
you
will
know. And
happily
so,
introduce you to them.
yeah, but I'm probably not going to contribute to
Yeah,
that.
exactly. No, I mean, and that's what you have to do. So listen, before we wrap up, one thing I do want to get your perspective on, Drew. You know, you've been in the agency now for a dozen years. You said it earlier, you were only dating your wife at the time. Since then,
Yeah.
you've been married, you know, you've had Alice, and that
Yep.
has presented its own opportunities for you to learn how to navigate be parenting a child who needs you to navigate parenting them. And
Yeah.
certainly I'm very vocal about what Ethan's role is in our house. And you know, we were glad that you guys were able to join us in Boston last month for the Little
Yeah.
Sparks Gala. But, you know, it's interesting to me because I have so many friends that are successful, that are doing really, really well professionally, that deal with a lot of things behind the scenes where you really only know as much as they want you to know. Now, we're an open book, and I feel like you are to a certain degree too, man. Like I have a pretty
Yeah.
good idea of what's going on, you know, at the Kinney house at any given time. But I mean, you bit off a lot in 2012 to come join your dad's agency, and there's been a lot that's changed. What I was going to say and didn't do a very articulate job of doing is there's a direct correlation to me that people who are parents of special needs children seem to be elevated in their professional careers too. Because I don't see a lot of my friends, and maybe it's just the friends that I hang out with too. I can understand, you know, that the data
Right.
set may be a bit skewed, but it's interesting to me how many people view that as an excuse, but yet I see people who are ultra successful in spite of, and it's almost like you channel your energy to make sure you're the best version of yourself that you can be when you're at work, because you have that added responsibility of knowing you have someone who needs you to be that. Not that we shouldn't think that way about all of our kids, but I
Right.
mean, my older boys can take care of themselves at this point. They're on their own. Go
Right.
figure it out, Grayson. You know, you're 22 now. You have a
Yeah.
fighting chance. But with Ethan, and knowing that Ethan will always be with us, it's a different dynamic. And it's a different dynamic for a couple reasons. Number one, it's a lot to carry around and just think about on a daily basis. But I have 3 other kids, and that's a lot for me to manage, because if they see that there's an abnormal amount of time being spent with him versus with them, then
Right.
jealousy naturally creeps in. So, I mean, I look at everything that I have piled on me as I try to grow the business, and it blows my mind. And I wonder if I didn't have him, what I just said, you know what, screw it. I'd rather just go be a producer for somebody and not have to worry
Right.
about
Right.
any of this nonsense, because I can make plenty of money, not have the headaches, not have the responsibilities of owning an agency, and I would still be there to take care of my wife and my other kids. But with him, it's almost like I know that I'm building something that whether I perpetuate it to the next generation or I exit, he's never going to have to worry about anything again. And that's what motivates and drives me every single day more than anything else. So I'm interested in your perspective of what that's been like.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. You come into these things, and I would tell you when we first had, kids, or, Alice, the game plan there, it was like when you're building like your life insurance and all that stuff was, hey, we're going to get her through college and then she'll be off, running on her own, and, we'll be able to deal with all these things. Well, that certainly changed after she had her brain issues and, all of her challenges. And now you got to wrap your brains around, all right, we've got 2 retirements to plan for, not just
Yeah.
mine. We got to plan for hers and how to get her through, her whole, the rest of the days that she'll be around. And yes, you definitely feel like you need to double down a little bit. And at times I have to catch myself, because I feel like I need to be Superman, and I can't necessarily be Superman with carrying her around and, dealing with everything. And Rachel gives me a hard time, because I'll baby her some with, she needs to learn to be a little, more independent and this and that, but I can't, that's the dad in you wanting to do everything for her. But yeah, it certainly seems like, a little bit of a mind shift occurs once you go through some of these situations. And like you said, not everybody always knows what's going on. We're a pretty open book. We don't necessarily share all the
Right.
details. And certainly, I remember as we sort of built in her recovery initially, you kind of felt like you're always going to make progress, but as setbacks occur, and there's been times, and even now, where she's had seizures again and things where we're battling a little bit and feeling in the grind a little bit, and you just try to figure out, there's only so much time in the day, but so that means you have to be hyper focused. And I don't know, I guess that's how we try to take it on, but thankfully we got a good team, and I can lean on Alan when I need to. It'd be a lot harder to be in this business without a brother or a good business partner, and dealing with all the stuff that you have to deal with at home too. So yeah, I
agree. Well, I'll tell you what, fellas, we're coming up on an hour. I'll end with this. My conversation in the solarium on the cruise boat last week also mentioned the fact that it's so cold in Vermont that you don't even need a regular cold plunge tub, that you have a livestock trough that you essentially crack the ice on and get in when you're going to do
He's got one.
I haven't seen the picture yet this year, but I can only assume that it's coming very, very soon.
I need to get it out of the garage. It needs to get it in the garage. It's down in the basement right now. I usually put it away for the summer because I don't want to have to pay for ice and all that. So
listen, it's January. What's your excuse? Free. What are you waiting on? Come on.
It's free ice now, so I got to get it back up there.
There you go. Awesome. Well, listen, fellas, I really appreciate. Go ahead, Alan. What'd you say?
I was going to say it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I'm glad you were able to come on. Always good to talk to you. Yeah. I'm not going to rub it in, but I am a little bit to let you know that a week from, 2 weeks from yesterday, I'm actually going to have to go down and do some administrative planning for Producers in Paradise in Key West. So, I mean...
I have it on the list. My youngest has to get through a couple more years of hockey. We'll be down there Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, one of these times.
Hey, you know what?
To assist in the planning.
Yes, the invite is open, and there will be enough business discussion to where you'll be able to write the trip off, I can assure you. I will be joined by Mike and Jen Carey and Dan and Cassie Smith, and there's an outside chance Doug and Liz Benz are going to be there too, but he just got back from Honolulu because their son Jack is over in the Marshall Islands in the middle of the Pacific doing some mission work for a year right out of high school, man. And that needs to be an episode where we just talk about that entire thing. But I'm doing God's work, guys. Don't hate me for it. I got to go down and do what needs to be done. So somebody's got to. Now the problem is it's when that cold spell is supposed to come in, and these are going to be in like the 40s.
Yeah.
Who knows? But anyhow, really appreciate you guys jumping on. And sure, we'll talk soon, fellas.
That's good.